You think Christmas cookies have always been sugar-sprinkled shortbreads and frosted cutouts? Think again. Before supermarket slice-and-bake rolls took over, American kitchens produced extraordinary holiday treasures requiring skill and recipes passed through generations. Let's dig into 30 forgotten Christmas cookies you could only find in old cookbooks. Lebkuchen were once the crown jewels of German-American Christmas baking, carrying centuries of European tradition into immigrant kitchens across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin. These spiced honey cakes required weeks of preparation, with dough mixed and aged in cool cellars to develop their characteristic deep flavor. The recipe called for honey warmed until liquid, mixed with brown sugar, eggs, and an aromatic blend of cinnamon, cloves, allspice, cardamom, and black pepper that filled homes with warmth. Candied citron, orange peel, and almonds were folded through the dough before it was rolled and cut into hearts, rectangles, or rounds. After baking until just set, each cookie received a brushing of rum glaze or a coating of white icing that hardened to a crackling finish. Families stored them in tins for weeks, knowing the flavors would meld and soften into something approaching perfection. Children watched their grandmothers work, learning that true Christmas baking was measured not in hours, but in patience and love. Pfeffernusse appeared on Christmas tables across the Midwest wherever German and Scandinavian families settled, bringing these small, round spice cookies dusted white with powdered sugar. The name meant pepper nuts, though the heat came from a complex blend of cinnamon, anise, cardamom, and cloves that created warmth without fire. The dough was stiff and required strong arms to mix, combining molasses, honey, and butter with flour until it could be rolled into small balls the size of walnuts. After baking until firm, the cookies were tossed while still warm in clouds of powdered sugar that clung to their rough surfaces like fresh snow. Stored in tins, they softened over days, the spices mellowing into something both sweet and deeply aromatic. Church cookie exchanges featured platters of Pfeffernusse, each family's version slightly different based on grandmother's proportions. These cookies represented the long journey from the old country to new American kitchens, carrying tradition in every spiced bite. Springirl demanded artistry that few modern bakers possess, requiring carved wooden molds passed through generations to press intricate designs into anise-flavored dough. German families treasured their Springirl molds the way others kept heirloom silver, some dating back a century with images of flowers, animals, and holiday scenes carved deep into hardwood. The dough was deceptively simple. Eggs beaten with sugar until thick and pale, then mixed with flour and anise extract until smooth enough to roll thin. Pressed into floured molds and carefully turned out, each cookie bore raised images of astonishing detail that held shape through baking. The cookies dried overnight before baking slowly until barely golden, then aged for weeks where the anise flavor deepened and texture softened. Springirl appeared at Christmas dinners as edible art, admired before eaten. The skill required meant fewer women each generation could produce them, until these remarkable cookies nearly vanished from American tables entirely. Sand tarts earned their name from their impossibly delicate texture, so fine and crumbly they seemed to dissolve on the tongue like sweet sand. Pennsylvania Dutch families perfected these thin butter cookies, rolling dough paper thin and cutting it into rounds before pressing blanched almonds and cinnamon sugar into each surface. The butter had to be real and plentiful, creamed until nearly white with sugar before eggs and vanilla were beaten in. The dough required chilling until firm, then rolling on floured boards with steady pressure to achieve translucent thinness. Baked until edges turned golden while centers remained pale, these cookies shattered at the first bite into buttery fragments that melted instantly. Families packed them carefully in tins between layers of waxed paper, knowing their fragility required gentle handling. Sand tarts represented the best of Christmas baking, simple ingredients transformed through skill into something ethereal. Their disappearance marks a loss of patience more than recipe. Kiffles carried the taste of Eastern European Christmases into American homes, their cream cheese pastry wrapped around fillings of ground walnuts, poppy seeds, or prune lekvar that grandmothers made from scratch. Hungarian, Slovak, and Polish immigrants brought their kifli traditions, adapting recipes to American ingredients while maintaining the crescent shapes that symbolized prosperity. The dough combined cream cheese with butter and flour, creating pastry so tender it threatened to fall apart while being rolled and filled. Each piece was shaped into a small rectangle, spread with filling, then rolled into crescents and curved gently before baking until golden. The walnut filling required grinding nuts fine with sugar and binding with egg white until paste-like. Church bake sales featured kiffles from different families, each version reflecting regional variations that made grandmother's version always best. These cookies connected communities to homelands left behind while celebrating new American lives. Date pinwheels represented the kind of careful, multi-step baking that defined serious Christmas preparations in kitchens across America. The filling came first. Chopped dates simmered with sugar, water, and a squeeze of lemon until they collapsed into thick, jammy paste that cooled while the dough was prepared. Brown sugar and butter creamed together with eggs formed the base of a dough rich enough to hold its spiral shape through slicing and baking. The chilled dough was rolled into rectangles, spread with the cooled date filling, then rolled tightly into logs that rested in the icebox until firm enough to slice cleanly. Each thin round revealed the spiral of dark date filling against golden dough, creating cookies as beautiful as they were delicious. Women's magazines featured date pinwheels in December issues throughout the 1950s, their photographs inspiring ambitious home bakers. Today, these spiraled treasures appear rarely, replaced by simpler recipes demanding less time and attention. Fruitcake cookies condensed all the flavors of traditional holiday fruitcake into individual treats that could be enjoyed without commitment to an entire loaf. These dense, chewy cookies packed candied cherries, citron, pineapple, and raisins into a brown sugar batter enriched with bourbon or brandy that deepened during storage. The fruit was chopped fine and often soaked overnight in spirits that plumped the raisins and softened the candied pieces. Pecans or walnuts added crunch against the sticky sweetness, while spices like cinnamon and nutmeg provided warmth. Dropped by spoonfuls onto baking sheets, they spread slightly into irregular mounds that emerged from ovens fragrant and glistening. Families who appreciated fruitcake but found whole loaves excessive embraced these cookies as the perfect compromise. They aged beautifully in tins, the flavors melding over weeks until Christmas Day brought them out for visitors. Fruitcake cookies carried tradition forward in manageable bites. Bourbon balls appeared on crystal platters at grown-up Christmas gatherings, their boozy sweetness reserved for those old enough to appreciate spirits in confection form. These no-bake treats combined crushed vanilla wafers with cocoa, powdered sugar, and enough bourbon to create a dough that could be rolled into balls and coated in additional sugar. The alcohol was never cooked away, leaving each bite with warming heat that spread through the chest and brought roses to cheeks. Some recipes called for corn syrup to bind everything together. Others relied on bourbon alone to create the right texture. The balls aged in refrigerators for days, the bourbon mellowing while the cookie crumbs absorbed moisture and transformed from gritty to smooth. Ladies' groups made these for holiday parties, understanding that certain traditions belonged to adults. Children were told these were special cookies not meant for them, only increasing their mystery and allure. Bourbon balls represented sophisticated holiday indulgence. Divinity drops brought southern sweetness to Christmas cookie platters, their cloud-like texture achieved through careful candy-making technique that intimidated timid bakers. These weren't true cookies, but confections, sugar syrup boiled to hardball stage, then beaten into stiff egg whites until the mixture transformed into glossy peaks that could be dropped onto waxed paper. Pecans or walnuts folded through added richness and crunch against the melt-away sweetness of the candy base. The process demanded precision. Humidity could ruin an entire batch, and undercooking left sticky puddles instead of firm peaks. Southern grandmothers knew the weather mattered, choosing dry winter days for divinity making and refusing to attempt it when rain threatened. The finished drops sat in fluted paper cups, their swirled tops catching light. Holiday gift boxes often included divinity alongside fudge and pralines. The skill required meant divinity making passed from mother to daughter through demonstration, not written recipe. Butter horns rolled flaky, buttery pastry around sweet fillings of ground nuts, creating crescent shapes that shattered into tender layers with each bite. The dough demanded European technique. Cold butter worked into flour until the mixture resembled coarse meal, then bound with sour cream to create pastry that baked into countless delicate layers. After chilling until firm, the dough was rolled, filled with cinnamon sugar and ground walnuts, then shaped into crescents that curved like tiny horns on baking sheets. The transformation in the oven was magical. Flat crescents puffed slightly, while surfaces turned golden and layers separated into flaky strata. Powdered sugar dusted over warm horns clung to their ridged surfaces like frost. Austrian, Hungarian, and German families each claimed butter horns as their own, variations reflecting regional preferences. These labor-intensive treats represented serious Christmas baking, the kind that took entire afternoons and filled kitchens with aromas drawing families together. Spritz cookies emerged from cookie presses in perfect ridged rosettes, stars, and trees that covered Christmas platters across Scandinavian and German-American homes. The dough had to be mixed exactly right. Too soft and it wouldn't hold its shape, too stiff and it wouldn't press through the metal plates. Butter, sugar, eggs, and almond extract combined into a rich paste that filled the barrel of treasured cookie presses passed down from mothers and grandmothers. Children watched in fascination as cranking the handle produced perfect shapes onto baking sheets, each one identical yet somehow unique. The cookies baked quickly, just until edges turned golden while centers stayed pale and tender. Some families tinted portions of dough pink or green for holiday variety, while others kept theirs butter yellow and pure. Spritz required the right equipment and the right technique, making them special occasion cookies that appeared only at Christmas. The press itself often came from the old country, its metal worn smooth from decades of use. San Bolster brought Norwegian tradition to American Christmas tables in the form of delicate almond-flavored tarts baked in fluted tin molds. Each tiny cup required pressing dough into intricate patterns with practiced thumbs, the thin shells baking into crisp, buttery vessels that could hold jam or be eaten plain. The molds themselves were treasures, often arriving as wedding gifts and passing through generations of women who learned the pressing technique by watching mothers work. The dough combined butter, sugar, ground almonds, and flour into something rich enough to shatter at first bite, yet sturdy enough to hold its fluted shape. After baking until barely golden, the tarts were turned out carefully, their pattern of ridges catching light like tiny crowns. Some families filled them with lingonberry preserves, others served them empty as butter cookies meant to accompany coffee. San Bolster represented the patience and precision of Nordic baking, each tiny tart a testament to skill passed through generations. Pepperc were the thin, crisp ginger cookies that Swedish grandmothers rolled impossibly thin before cutting into hearts, stars, and goats that hung from Christmas trees. The dough required aging, mixed days before baking, resting in cool pantries where the spices mellowed into something unified and complex. Ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and cardamom created warmth that spread through the mouth with each snap of these paper-thin cookies. Rolling required patience and skill. The dough spread so thin that light showed through before cutting. After baking, just until set, the cookies emerged crisp enough to shatter but tender enough to melt on the tongue. Families decorated them with simple white icing, creating intricate patterns that transformed cookies into edible ornaments. Pepperc were never rushed. The dough demanded its resting time, and rolling demanded steady hands. These cookies connected Swedish-American families to their heritage, each batch carrying memories of grandmothers who knew some things couldn't be hurried. Anise drops appeared on Italian-American Christmas tables as small, round cookies with the distinctive licorice flavor that divided families into lovers and avoiders. The dough was simple, eggs beaten with sugar until thick, flavored with anise extract or crushed anise seeds, then mixed with flour until smooth enough to pipe onto sheets. After piping, the cookies rested overnight, developing a skin that would crack during baking to create their characteristic appearance. The finished cookies were firm on the outside, slightly soft within, with flavor that intensified over days of storage. Italian grandmothers made them by the hundreds, packing them into tins alongside other holiday treats for visiting relatives. The anise flavor was non-negotiable. These cookies tasted of tradition, and tradition was not open for debate. Children who disliked them grew into adults who craved them, the flavor becoming inextricably linked with Christmas itself. Anise drops represented old-world baking brought faithfully to American kitchens. Mincemeat cookies packed all the complex sweetness of Christmas mincemeat into chewy drop cookies that satisfied without requiring pie. The filling, that combination of dried fruits, candied peels, spices, and sometimes brandy, was folded into brown sugar cookie dough that baked into irregular mounds of concentrated holiday flavor. Families who made their own mincemeat used it lavishly, while others relied on jarred versions that still delivered the essential taste of the season. The cookies were dense and chewy, studded with visible bits of fruit and peel that glistened where they touched the surface. Spices permeated every bite, the cinnamon and nutmeg and clove creating warmth that lasted long after swallowing. These were cookies for adults who appreciated complexity over simple sweetness, though children often surprised themselves by reaching for seconds. Mincemeat cookies appeared at church gatherings, their old-fashioned character marking them as recipes from grandmother's generation. Fatigman were Norwegian fried cookies twisted into diamond shapes and dusted with powdered sugar, their name meaning poor man, despite requiring precious eggs and butter to make. The dough was rich with egg yolks and cream, flavored with cardamom and a touch of brandy that gave it subtle warmth. Rolled thin and cut into diamonds, each piece was slashed through the center and one end pulled through to create the characteristic twist before frying in hot lard until golden. The cookies emerged light and crisp, their twisted shape catching sugar in every crevice. Making Fatigman was an event, with women gathering in kitchens to roll, cut, twist, and fry while catching up on the year's news. The frying required attention. Too hot and they burned, too cool and they absorbed grease instead of crisping. Fatigman appeared on holiday tables piled high, their powdered sugar coating everything nearby. These fried treasures connected Norwegian-American families to Christmas traditions stretching back generations. Kringa were the pretzel-shaped Scandinavian cookies that required technique impossible to learn from recipes alone. The dough combined sour cream with butter and sugar, creating something tender yet sturdy enough to hold its twisted shape through baking. Each piece was rolled into a rope by practiced hands, then looped and twisted into the traditional pretzel form that gave them their name. The motion had to be learned by watching. Too much pressure and the dough broke, too little, and the shape wouldn't hold. After baking until just golden, Kringa emerged tender and slightly sweet, with a texture somewhere between cookie and pastry. Norwegian grandmothers made them by the dozens, their hands moving automatically through motions practiced since childhood. Children tried to help, but rarely achieved the perfect twist until years of practice developed muscle memory. Kringa represented folk baking that couldn't be preserved in cookbooks, requiring instead the passing of skill from generation to generation. Zimn were German cinnamon stars that sparkled with white meringue topping against deeply spiced almond bases. The cookie itself was flourless, made from ground almonds mixed with cinnamon, sugar, and egg whites into a paste that could be rolled and cut into star shapes. Before baking, each star received a coating of meringue that baked to glossy white perfection, creating stunning contrast against the brown cookie beneath. The process was finicky. The meringue topping had to be just thick enough to stay white without browning, requiring precise oven temperature and timing. The finished cookies were chewy with almond richness, the cinnamon warmth balanced by sweet meringue that crackled against teeth. Zimn appeared on German-American Christmas tables as jewels among plainer cookies, their star shapes and white tops making them instantly recognizable. The skill required meant fewer bakers attempted them each generation, until these beautiful cookies became increasingly rare. Thumbprint cookies carried simple genius in their design. Round butter cookies with center indentations filled with jewel-bright jam that baked into glossy pools. The dough was rich with butter and often included ground nuts that gave it tender crumb and toasted flavor. Before baking, each ball was rolled in chopped pecans or walnuts, then pressed in the center with a thumb to create the well that would hold the filling. Raspberry, strawberry, or apricot jam filled those indentations, turning plain cookies into stained glass windows of color. The jam bubbled and set during baking, transforming from sticky preserve to firm, glistening center. Children loved helping make these, their small thumbs leaving perfect impressions in the dough. Cookie exchanges featured thumbprints made with homemade jams from summer berries, each batch reflecting the maker's garden and preserving skills. Thumbprint cookies represented accessible elegance, simple enough for beginning bakers yet impressive enough for special occasions. Brown sugar drops were the humble cookies that tasted of nothing more than butter, brown sugar, and thyme, their simplicity making them somehow more satisfying than fancier treats. The dough required browning butter first, creating nutty depth that combined with dark brown sugar's molasses notes into something approaching caramel. Mixed with flour and just enough egg to bind, the dough dropped onto sheets in irregular mounds that baked into crisp-edged cookies with chewy centers. No spices competed for attention, no fruits or nuts distracted from the pure essence of browned butter and sugar. These were cookies grandmothers made when other ingredients ran short, discovering that restraint could create its own kind of luxury. Children often preferred them to more elaborate offerings, reaching past decorated cookies for these plain brown circles. Brown sugar drops proved that Christmas baking didn't require complexity to create memory. Sometimes the simplest flavors carried the deepest meaning. Stollen slices brought German Christmas bread tradition to cookie platters, the rich yeasted dough filled with marzipan, dried fruits, and nuts that made each piece a celebration. True stollen required weeks of preparation. Dried fruit soaked in rum, dough mixed and allowed to rise slowly, then shaped around a core of marzipan before baking until golden. The finished loaf was brushed with melted butter while still hot, then buried under snowdrifts of powdered sugar that sealed in moisture. Sliced thin, each piece revealed swirls of fruit, pockets of marzipan, and tender crumb that improved with age. German grandmothers started their stollen before Advent, knowing the flavors needed time to meld into something transcendent. The cookies were never rushed. Proper stollen demanded patience that modern kitchens rarely allowed. Families who maintained the tradition understood they were preserving something precious, each loaf connecting them to generations of bakers who knew that Christmas deserved this kind of attention. Almond crescents dusted white with powdered sugar looked like tiny snowdrifts on Christmas platters, their tender texture melting on the tongue. The dough combined ground almonds with butter, sugar, and just enough flour to hold everything together, creating cookies so delicate they threatened to crumble before reaching mouths. Each piece was shaped by hand into crescent moons, the curves requiring gentle pressure and practiced fingers. After baking until barely golden, the still warm crescents were rolled in powdered sugar that clung to every surface. The almond flavor was pure and intense, the butter richness balanced by sugar's sweetness. These cookies appeared across European American communities. Austrian, German, Hungarian families each claimed their own version with slight variations in spice or shape. Almond crescents represented refined holiday baking, the kind that required skill and patience. Their fragility meant they rarely survived shipping, making them treasures found only on family platters. Pflaumentaschen were German plum pockets that wrapped spiced fruit filling inside tender pastry, each one a small present waiting to be unwrapped by eager hands. The dough was rich with butter and sour cream, rolling out tender and flaky before being cut into squares. Thick plum jam or preserved plums seasoned with cinnamon and cloves filled each center, the corners folded up and pinched to create pocket shapes that held their filling through baking. The pastries emerged golden and fragrant, the fruit bubbling slightly where it escaped through seams. German grandmothers made these alongside other Christmas cookies, their plum preserves put up in summer specifically for holiday baking. Children loved the fruit-filled surprises, the pastry giving way to concentrated sweetness. Pflaumentaschen connected summer's harvest to winter's celebration, each pocket carrying preserved sunshine. These cookies demanded both preserving skills and baking ability, making them increasingly rare as fewer families maintained both traditions. Speculas were the spiced windmill cookies that Dutch and Belgian immigrants brought to American Christmases. Their intricate designs pressed from carved wooden molds. The dough required aging, mixed with brown sugar, butter, and a complex blend of cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, and white pepper, then rested for days while flavors merged. Pressed into floured molds carved with windmills, St. Nicholas figures, and folk art patterns, the cookies emerged bearing raised designs of astonishing detail. After baking until deeply golden, the speculas developed crisp texture and concentrated spice flavor that intensified over days. The molds themselves were family treasures, some brought from the old country, others carved by craftsmen who understood that Christmas cookies deserved artistry. Children delighted in the picture cookies, eating windmill sails first or saving St. Nicholas for last. Speculas represented the meeting of folk art and baking, each cookie a small sculpture meant to be admired before consumed. Chocolate crinkles emerged from ovens with dramatic, cracked surfaces, their dark interiors showing through powdered sugar coating like earth through snow. The dough was intensely chocolate, made with melted, unsweetened chocolate, oil, sugar, and eggs that created fudgy texture. After chilling until firm, balls were rolled in powdered sugar, then baked until the coating cracked into the characteristic pattern. The contrast was stunning: deep dark chocolate against bright white sugar, soft centers against crisp edges. Church cookie exchanges featured crinkles alongside heritage recipes, their dramatic appearance drawing eyes across crowded platters. Children loved the chocolatey intensity, while adults appreciated how the sweetness balanced the bittersweet depths. Chocolate crinkles proved that newer traditions could stand alongside old ones, earning their place on holiday platters through sheer deliciousness. Kurabites were Greek butter cookies shaped into crescents and buried under powdered sugar, their tender crumbs scented with rose water or brandy. The dough was almost pure butter, creamed until impossibly light before flour and ground almonds were folded through. Each cookie was shaped by hand, often pressed with a clove in the center that would be removed before eating, leaving its fragrance behind. After baking until barely golden, the cookies were doused with rose water or brandy while hot, then buried in powdered sugar while still warm. The result was cookies so tender they dissolved on the tongue, rich with butter and perfumed with flour or spirit. Greek families made kurabites for Christmas and New Year, each batch connecting them to Mediterranean traditions passed through generations of women who guarded their recipes closely. Russian tea cakes went by many names: Mexican wedding cookies, snowballs, butterballs, but the recipe remained remarkably consistent across cultures that claimed them. Ground pecans or walnuts combined with butter, sugar, and flour into dough that baked into tender rounds. While still warm, the cookies were rolled in powdered sugar, then rolled again once cool, creating thick coatings that melted on the tongue alongside the buttery crumb. The texture was impossibly tender, falling apart at the slightest pressure into sandy richness studded with nut fragments. Christmas platters across America featured these under different names, each family certain theirs was the authentic version. The simplicity of the recipe belied its perfection. Butter, sugar, nuts, and flour combined into something greater than individual parts. Florentines straddled the line between cookie and candy, their lacy almond wafers backed with chocolate that cracked at the first bite. The batter was barely there. Cream, butter, sugar, and honey cooked together before sliced almonds and candied orange peel were stirred through. Baked until edges turned deep golden, the cookies emerged as crispy, caramelized discs studded with nuts and fruit. After cooling, the flat sides were spread with dark chocolate that set into a thin coating. Florentines appeared in bakery windows as holiday luxuries, their price reflecting the skill required to make them properly. Home bakers attempted them with varying success, learning that temperature and timing were everything. Italian grandmothers who mastered them produced cookies rivaling any professional confectionery in flavor and beauty. Macaroons in their old-fashioned form were chewy coconut mounds, not the delicate French sandwiches that would later claim the name. Shredded coconut combined with sweetened condensed milk and egg whites, dropped by spoonfuls onto sheets and baked until golden-tipped and fragrant. The texture was dense and chewy, intensely coconut with a sweetness that bordered on confection. Some bakers dipped the bottoms in chocolate, creating cookies that satisfied both coconut lovers and chocolate cravers. Jewish families made macaroons for Passover because they contained no flour. But the cookies appeared on Christmas platters too, their simplicity making them welcome alongside fancier treats. Children loved their candy-like sweetness, while adults appreciated their ease of preparation and reliable results. Nut horns twisted flaky pastry around sweet walnut or pecan filling, each crescent shape dusted with powdered sugar that caught in every crevice. The dough was rich with cream cheese and butter, creating layers that shattered into tender flakes with each bite. The filling combined ground nuts with sugar, cinnamon, and sometimes honey into paste that stayed moist while the pastry crisped around it. After shaping each piece into horns that curved like tiny crescents, the cookies baked until golden and fragrant. Eastern European grandmothers, Hungarian, Polish, Slovak, each claimed nut horns as their heritage, variations reflecting regional preferences for different nuts. These cookies required skill in handling tender dough and shaping perfect crescents. Date nut roll was the kind of dessert that made children hover anxiously around the kitchen, waiting for the moment it was sliced. It was not a pie or a cake, but a refrigerator candy, rolled by hand and packed with sweet dates, nuts, and just enough cookie crumbs to hold everything together. Families made it weeks before the holiday, storing it away in wax paper like treasure hidden in the back of the fridge. When you sliced it, the spirals of sticky fruit and crunchy nuts made every piece look like a tiny stained glass window, and the taste was just as memorable. It was sweet without being overwhelming, rich without being heavy, and easy to stretch for a crowd when money was tight. Making it was a labor of love, requiring time and patience that people no longer make space for. As store-bought candy boxes and pre-made sweets filled the shelves, the roll faded away, seen as too old-fashioned or too fiddly for modern kitchens, but back then it symbolized celebration, care, and the quiet excitement of a holiday dessert pulled from a cold shelf on a chilly evening. A little forgotten, maybe, but never undeserving of its place at the table. Baking a custard pie for the elders was one of those gestures Grandma made quietly, with a sense of respect that never needed to be spoken out loud. She knew the older relatives looked forward to that soft, simple dessert more than anything else on the table. While everyone else fussed over pumpkin and pecan, the custard pie sat in the oven, thickening slowly, its surface turning smooth and golden. She whisked the filling gently, poured it carefully, and baked it with a patience she rarely needed for any other dish. It was delicate, subtle, and comforting in a way younger people often overlooked. When she sliced it, the texture was velvety and warm, a reminder of earlier times when desserts were made from whatever ingredients were available. The elders always thanked her with a look that said more than words ever could. That pie was her tribute to them, a dessert that honored their memories and their place at the table. Boiled custard served warm in cups was Christmas Eve tradition in Southern households, a drinkable dessert that bridged the gap between eggnog and pudding. Rich with eggs, milk, sugar, and vanilla, the custard was cooked slowly over gentle heat until it thickened enough to coat a spoon. Families served it warm from heirloom cups, sometimes with a grating of nutmeg on top. The texture was silky and comforting, substantial enough to satisfy without the heaviness of solid desserts. Making boiled custard required patience and attention. Too much heat would scramble the eggs, ruining hours of work. Grandmothers passed down their techniques through demonstration, teaching daughters to recognize the exact moment the custard reached perfection. Some families added bourbon, transforming it into something approaching liquid luxury. The tradition faded as store-bought eggnog became convenient, and fewer cooks possessed the skill to execute proper custard. Boiled custard was more than dessert. It was ritual. Hard sauce made with real butter and brandy was the crowning glory served atop plum puddings and mince pies throughout the holiday season. Butter was creamed until fluffy and white, then beaten with powdered sugar and generous amounts of brandy or rum until it formed a smooth, boozy spread. The sauce was shaped into decorative molds or simply formed into logs, then chilled until firm and sliced at serving time. The flavor was intensely buttery with sweet alcohol bite, melting immediately when placed on hot pudding and soaking into every crevice. In Victorian and early American kitchens, hard sauce represented sophistication and proper Christmas preparation, something made ahead and stored in the icebox for weeks. Families often had special molds shaped like holly leaves or Christmas symbols for forming the sauce. The ritual of making it was passed from mothers to daughters, with each family adjusting the brandy-to-butter ratio to personal preference. Modern desserts rarely feature this accompaniment, but it once transformed simple puddings into something genuinely luxurious and memorable. Making a kid's table feel special was something Grandma did with joy because she understood the magic of giving children a place of their own. She set out colorful cups, tiny forks, and plates with small, perfect portions. She added little touches adults often overlooked, like fun napkins or extra rolls for tiny hands. The kids would wiggle in their seats, excited to be together, feeling grown up and important. Grandma loved hearing their laughter from across the room. She knew that even small celebrations mattered, and the kids' table became one of the happiest spots in the house. She always checked on them first, making sure they had enough food and enough fun, because she believed childhood memories were built from moments just like those. Orange slice cake was a holiday surprise wrapped inside a dessert, dense and chewy with bursts of candied orange that lit up every bite. People loved making it because it felt playful, different from the usual pies and puddings. The chopped orange candy slices melted slightly in the oven, blending with nuts, coconut, and a rich batter to create a texture unlike anything else on the table. Children always recognized the taste immediately, since those little orange candies were a rare treat any other time of year. Families baked this cake weeks in advance because the flavor deepened as it sat, becoming richer and more complex with every passing day. It was the kind of dessert that made people smile before they even tasted it. But as candy companies changed their recipes and holiday traditions shifted towards simpler desserts, orange slice cake faded away. It was too old-fashioned, too sweet, too heavy for modern tastes, and eventually it disappeared from cookbooks and memories alike. Still, for anyone who grew up eating it, the flavor remains unforgettable. A cheerful dessert from a different time. Plum pudding arrived at Christmas tables wreathed in blue flames, brandy burning dramatically as families gathered to witness the spectacle. This dense, dark pudding contained no plums at all. The name referred to raisins, which were once called plums in England. The batter combined sweet breadcrumbs, flour, dried fruits, nuts, and enough brandy to preserve it for months. Families steamed the pudding for hours in cloth-wrapped molds, then aged it like fruitcake for optimal flavor. On Christmas Day, the pudding was reheated, doused with warmed brandy, and set alight before being carried ceremoniously to the table. Hidden inside were silver coins or charms that promised luck to whoever found them in their slice. The tradition required advanced planning and genuine skill, making it impractical for modern, rushed households. Plum pudding represented the pinnacle of Victorian Christmas celebration, a dessert that demanded reverence. Mincemeat pie with real sweet and brandy was the Christmas dessert that took weeks to prepare and lasted through the entire season. Families started in November, chopping dried fruits, apples, raisins, and citrus peel, then mixing them with actual beef sweet, spices, molasses, and generous amounts of brandy or rum. The mixture was packed into stone crocks and left to age, the flavors melding and intensifying as the alcohol preserved everything. By Christmas, the mincemeat was dark, rich, and incredibly complex, tasting of cinnamon, cloves, citrus, and deep boozy sweetness. Baked in flaky pastry crusts, these pies were dense and substantial, meant to be served in small slices with hard sauce or whipped cream. In Victorian homes and early 20th century kitchens, mincemeat pie represented tradition and abundance, something you made once and enjoyed for weeks. The preparation was ritualistic, often done by grandmothers who guarded their recipes and aging techniques. Modern versions with no meat or alcohol cannot touch the depth of the original. Sweet potato custard was the quiet soul of Thanksgiving long before sweet potato pie stole the spotlight, a silky baked dish that tasted like home even in uncertain years. Families loved it because it was simple and comforting, made with sweet potatoes, milk, spices, and a steady hand. It came from an older style of cooking that relied on patience rather than tools. When it came from the oven, lightly set and fragrant, its sweetness came from the vegetable itself instead of handfuls of sugar. Adults swore it softened even the hardest winters, but as shortcuts and store-bought pies took over, the custard was pushed aside as too plain or old-fashioned. People forgot that its simplicity was exactly its charm. No crust, no excess, just a warm, velvety dessert that felt like a hug on a cold evening. Today it appears mostly in memories and fading recipe cards, but reviving it once is enough to understand why it mattered. Handwritten recipe cards pulled from a tin box were one of Grandma's most treasured tools, even though she never treated them like anything fragile. The box was old, dented, and faded, but inside lived the entire memory of her kitchen. Each card carried soft edges, smudges of flour, and notes written over years of trial and adjustment. She pulled the box down every Thanksgiving, sorting through the cards quickly until she found the right one. Sometimes she read it carefully. Other times, she just glanced, using it more as a reminder than a guide. Kids loved asking about the cards, and she always let them hold one gently, smiling as they traced the handwriting. Those cards held her patience, her practice, and the wisdom she inherited from cooks before her. No digital recipe could ever replace their warmth or their history. Every dish she made felt touched by that old tin box. Nestle Road pudding brought Russian elegance to American Christmas tables during the Gilded Age. This frozen dessert combined chestnut puree with candied fruits, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream, all enriched with egg custard and a generous pour of maraschino liqueur. The mixture was frozen in decorative molds, then unmolded to reveal elaborate shapes that gleamed on silver platters. Named for a Russian diplomat, the pudding represented cosmopolitan sophistication that wealthy families aspired to display. The chestnut flavor was unlike anything else on the holiday table, earthy and sweet in equal measure. Making it required sourcing chestnuts, candying fruits, and mastering the temperamental frozen custard technique. Families served thin slices, the richness demanding restraint. The pudding disappeared as its ingredients became exotic and its preparation too demanding for modern schedules. Nestle Road pudding was Christmas elegance frozen into unforgettable form. Crown roast of pork decorated with paper frills was the showstopper centerpiece that made Christmas dinner feel truly spectacular. Butchers prepared these special roasts by tying pork rib sections into circles, creating natural crowns that stood upright on platters. The center was stuffed with bread dressing mixed with sausage, apples, and herbs, while the roast itself was rubbed with garlic, salt, and pepper before slow roasting until golden brown. Paper frills were placed on each rib bone before serving, creating a festive appearance that drew gasps when the roast arrived at the table. The meat was tender and juicy, the stuffing absorbed porky juices, and the presentation was genuinely impressive. In mid-century American homes, crown roast represented prosperity and celebration, something families ordered specially and served with pride. The carving was ceremonial, each person receiving ribs and stuffing together. Today's simpler roasts cannot match the drama and elegance, though the preparation required skill and confidence that modern cooks often lack. Prune cake was one of those desserts people loved long before they ever admitted it. A moist, spiced treat that showed up on countless holiday tables thanks to its deep flavor and long shelf life. Grandmothers especially swore by it, calling it their secret weapon because it never dried out and always tasted better the next day. The prunes disappeared into the batter, lending sweetness and moisture without announcing themselves too boldly, and the spices wrapped everything in a warm, comforting aroma. It was a cake that stretched ingredients wisely, perfect for large families and tight budgets. Children would roll their eyes at the thought of prunes, but one bite of that sticky sweet crumb made them believers. It was a dessert born from practicality, the kind of treat that made the most of what people had on hand. But as times changed and holiday desserts became flashier, prune cake was left behind. It did not look glamorous, it did not have fancy toppings, and it did not fit the modern obsession with picture-perfect food. So it vanished, even though anyone who ever loved it can still taste it in their memory, a quiet classic forgotten but never truly gone. Adding pecans to almost everything during Thanksgiving was one of those habits Grandma never explained but everyone accepted. It was part tradition, part instinct, and part quiet belief that pecans made a dish feel complete. She sprinkled them into pies, folded them into breads, and scattered them over casseroles with easy confidence. The house would fill with a soft, nutty smell, a warm aroma that felt tied to every holiday memory. She cracked some by hand, saving the biggest pieces for the top of her desserts because she cared about how they looked as much as how they tasted. Even store-bought pecans were sorted carefully, chosen like small treasures. Pecans were not just an ingredient. They were her signature, the gentle crunch that told you she had passed through the kitchen. Newer recipes came and went, but nothing replaced the comfort of finding pecans in her dishes. They were the sound, smell, and texture of Thanksgiving in her home, one sprinkle at a time. She built the feeling of the holiday. Snow pudding with custard sauce brought elegance to Victorian Christmas tables with its cloud-like texture and golden accompaniment. The pudding was made from gelatin, sugar, lemon juice, and stiffly beaten egg whites, creating something ethereal and trembling. It arrived at the table pure white and shimmering, often molded into decorative shapes that showcased the cook's skill. The custard sauce, rich with egg yolks and vanilla, provided warmth and richness against the cold, airy pudding. This combination of textures, soft, cold, light against warm, smooth, rich, made every spoonful a revelation. Families considered it sophisticated enough for company, yet simple enough for Christmas Eve supper. The dessert required careful timing, the gelatin needing to set properly before unmolding. Children adored the wobbling presentation, while adults appreciated the delicate balance of flavors. Snow pudding vanished as instant desserts replaced homemade gelatin creations, taking its quiet elegance with it. Baked Alaska flamed tableside was the dramatic Christmas dessert that combined ice cream, cake, and meringue into a theatrical dining experience. Sponge cake was cut into rounds and soaked with liqueur, then topped with brick ice cream that had been shaped and frozen rock hard. The entire construction was covered in thick meringue that was quickly browned under the broiler or with a blowtorch, creating insulation that protected the ice cream while the exterior caramelized. At the table, brandy was poured over and ignited, sending blue flames dancing across the white surface. The contrast of temperatures was shocking and delicious, hot meringue giving way to cold ice cream with tender cake underneath. In fancy restaurants and ambitious home kitchens during the 1950s and 1960s, Baked Alaska represented the pinnacle of dessert showmanship, something that required timing, confidence, and theatrical flair. Families remembered these desserts for decades, the drama making the occasion unforgettable. Today's simpler desserts cannot match the spectacle or the satisfying complexity. Pumpkin chiffon pie was the lighter, softer cousin of the traditional pumpkin pie, a dessert so airy it felt like eating a sweet autumn cloud. It became popular when cooks wanted something elegant but not too heavy after a long day of holiday eating, and chiffon pies were considered the height of sophistication. Instead of the dense custard people are used to today, pumpkin chiffon pie relied on whipped egg whites, folded carefully into a spiced pumpkin mixture, creating a silky filling that floated inside its crust. Families loved it because it felt special, almost fancy, even when the ingredients were simple and inexpensive. Mothers would make it the night before Thanksgiving so it had time to set, and children would sneak into the refrigerator just to poke at the trembling surface. But when canned pumpkin fillings and pre-made pies started taking over in grocery stores, chiffon pies faded fast. The delicate preparation did not fit into a world rushing toward convenience. People forgot the feeling of lifting a slice that barely weighed anything, of tasting pumpkin in a way that felt light instead of heavy. The pie disappeared, replaced by versions that were simpler but far less magical. Still, anyone who ever tasted a homemade pumpkin chiffon pie will tell you that nothing has matched its airy charm since. In a holiday built on tradition, it remains one of the sweetest losses. Serving green bean casserole the old way was one of those traditions Grandma never questioned, because she believed there was no sense in changing something that already worked. She made it exactly as she learned it, with canned green beans, that familiar can of cream soup, and the crunchy onions sprinkled on top. Nothing fancy, nothing experimental, nothing added or taken away. She stirred everything together with steady hands, poured it into her old baking dish, and slid it into the oven until the top was golden and bubbling. The smell was unmistakable, drifting through the house like a memory. When she carried it to the table, there was always at least one person who smiled and said it looked exactly the same as last year. That was the point. The comfort came from consistency, from knowing a dish would taste the way it always had. Grandma never chased trends or new versions. She believed the old way was the best way because it held the flavor of every Thanksgiving that came before, and she was right. Syllabub in stemmed glasses was Christmas elegance whipped into frothy perfection. This ancient English dessert combined cream, sugar, and wine or sherry, beaten until it formed soft peaks that held their shape in delicate glasses. The mixture separated slowly, the creamy foam floating above a pool of flavored liquid that guests sipped after finishing the top. Families served syllabub at the end of Christmas dinner, the light texture providing relief after heavy courses. Making it required vigorous whisking by hand, often delegated to daughters learning domestic arts. The wine needed careful selection. Too sweet and the dessert became cloying, too dry and it lacked charm. Some versions incorporated lemon juice for brightness, cutting through the richness with citrus tang. The dessert looked ethereal in crystal glasses, catching candlelight and trembling with each movement. Syllabub disappeared as electric mixers made whipped cream commonplace and the patience for hand whisking vanished. It was celebration in a glass. Oyster stew on Christmas Eve was the elegant tradition that brought families together before midnight church services. Fresh oysters were gently heated in butter and milk until their edges just curled, then seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of celery salt or mace. The result was creamy, briny, and luxurious, tasting of the sea with rich dairy undertones. Served in fine china bowls with oyster crackers and sometimes a pat of butter floating on top, this was celebration food that felt special without being heavy. In coastal communities and inland cities alike, oyster stew represented Christmas Eve tradition from the 1920s through the 1960s, something families ate before attending services or after coming home from caroling. The preparation was quick but required attention, and the ingredients were expensive enough to feel indulgent. Children often received their first taste of oysters this way, learning to appreciate their delicate flavor. Today, it has largely disappeared, replaced by heavier meals, but it once defined Christmas Eve elegance. Mincemeat pie was once the crown jewel of Thanksgiving, the kind of dessert that could stop you in your tracks because the house filled with the smell of spice, fruit, and something warm that felt older than memory. People forget that mincemeat was not just a pie. It was a ritual built slowly with dried apples, raisins, sweet, cloves, and whatever a family saved for the holiday. It was about turning humble ingredients into something that tasted like celebration even when times were thin. Grandmothers made it by instinct, each slice slightly different depending on the year's harvest. Kids wrinkled their noses at the idea of sweat, but one bite of that sticky, rich filling turned anyone into a believer. It demanded patience and trust in the old ways, which is why it faded once canned fillings and pre-made pies appeared. The world sped up, and mincemeat pie did not fit into a life lived in a hurry. Today, most people have never tasted it at all, but anyone who makes it from scratch understands why older generations fought to keep the recipe alive. Dense, spiced, comforting, and bold, it held on to tradition even as the world changed. Making her own pie crust was one of the clearest signs that Grandma believed the foundation of a dessert mattered as much as the filling. While others leaned on store-bought shortcuts, she reached for flour, butter, salt, and cold water with the confidence of someone who had done it thousands of times. She pressed, folded, and rolled the dough until it reached that perfect balance between tender and sturdy. She never rushed. She chilled the dough when it needed resting and softened it when it needed warmth, and the result was unmistakable. Her crust flaked in soft layers that melted on the fork, cracking gently under the knife in a sound everyone recognized. People pretended to focus on the filling, but the truth was they came for the crust. It tasted like tradition and skill learned long before anyone else at the table was born. Every pie carried her signature, from the golden sheen to the crimped edge shaped by her fingertips. Store-bought crusts never stood a chance. She never bragged, because to her this was simply the right way to do it. Her pies were unforgettable because she was baked into every slice. Suet pudding with hard sauce was Christmas comfort food for families who valued richness over refinement. The pudding itself was simple: flour, suet, sugar, and spices steamed until dense and satisfying. What elevated it was the hard sauce, a mixture of butter, powdered sugar, and brandy beaten until fluffy and pale. The cold sauce melted slowly over warm pudding, creating rivers of boozy sweetness that soaked into every bite. Families served this after heavy Christmas dinners when something substantial was needed to conclude the feast. The suet gave the pudding a texture impossible to achieve with butter, tender yet sturdy enough to hold together. Children received smaller portions with less sauce, the brandy content making it adult territory. Making hard sauce required patience and strong arms, the butter needing thorough beating to achieve proper consistency. This dessert disappeared as sweet became difficult to source and modern tastes shifted toward lighter fare. Boiled Christmas pudding wrapped in cheesecloth was the centerpiece dessert that required 3 hours of steaming and months of aging. Families mixed dried fruits, breadcrumbs, suet, eggs, molasses, and brandy into a dense batter that was packed into pudding basins or wrapped tightly in cloth, then boiled in massive pots on Christmas morning. The smell of spices and fruit filled entire houses as the pudding steamed, transforming into something dark, moist, and incredibly rich. When finally unwrapped and turned out onto plates, the pudding was doused with more brandy and set aflame, arriving at the table wreathed in blue fire. The texture was dense and almost cake-like, studded with fruits that had plumped during cooking and infused with deep spice and alcohol flavors. In British and American households through the mid-20th century, Christmas pudding represented the height of holiday tradition, something prepared with ceremony and served with pride. Hidden coins and charms were often baked inside for luck. Today's instant versions miss the ritual entirely. Coconut custard pie was the quiet heartbeat of Southern holiday tables, a dessert that won people over without needing decoration or fuss. It came from the simplest ingredients: eggs, milk, sugar, shredded coconut, and vanilla. As it baked, the custard settled low while the coconut rose and turned golden, creating a pie that tasted warm and familiar. Families loved it because it brought sunshine to a cold season and reminded them of childhood afternoons. It showed up at potlucks and Thanksgiving dinners long before more elaborate desserts became popular. Older cooks trusted it because it never failed, even in lean years. But as store-bought pies and trendier flavors crowded the table, this humble favorite faded. People forgot how satisfying a soft custard and toasted coconut could be. Still, in homes where old recipes survive, this pie remains a gentle reminder of slower holidays and simple comfort. Keeping the house warm and cozy on Thanksgiving was something Grandma did without even thinking, turning the entire home into a place that felt safe and soft. The oven warmed the kitchen, blankets lay folded on chairs, and the lighting glowed low and gentle instead of bright and harsh. Even before the food came out, the house felt like a refuge from the cold outside. People walked in and immediately relaxed, their shoulders dropping as the warmth wrapped around them. The smell of roasting turkey mixed with the faint scent of cinnamon or something sweet she always had sitting on the back burner. The windows fogged slightly from the heat, making the outside world feel far away. Grandma knew comfort was part of the meal, part of the celebration, part of what made Thanksgiving feel complete. She created that warmth as naturally as she breathed. Charlotte Russe in molded glory was the showstopper dessert of Victorian Christmas celebrations. The elaborate creation featured ladyfingers lining a mold filled with Bavarian cream flavored with vanilla and often studded with candied fruit. Once chilled and unmolded, the Charlotte revealed perfect cylindrical beauty, the ladyfingers creating a delicate shell around the creamy interior. Families reserved this for Christmas dinner when company was present and impressions mattered. The preparation required planning and skill. The ladyfingers needed precise trimming, the cream needed perfect texture, and the unmolding demanded steady hands. Some versions added whipped cream rosettes or crystallized violets for additional elegance. The dessert melted slowly at room temperature, encouraging prompt service and appreciative consumption. Charlotte Russe required the kind of leisure and domestic skill that modern households rarely possess. Its disappearance marks the loss of an era when holiday desserts were genuine achievements. Which forgotten Christmas cookie do you wish you could taste again? Drop your memories in the comments, hit like, and subscribe so we can keep bringing back the recipes that made holidays magical.